I don't want to teach my kids how to drive. I mean, if I'm honest, I barely want to drive my own car myself, let alone teach someone else. Ever since Tesla introduced the idea of self-driving cars to the mainstream, I've started to wonder that maybe that world isn't so far off. Hi friendos, I'm your host David West, and in this episode I have a chat with Dylan Smith, a Tesla owner and self-driving car enthusiast who shares his insights and experiences with autonomous vehicles. We talk about how the world of transportation is changing and how my dream of not having to teach my kids how to drive might actually become a reality. So buckle up, enjoy the ride, and welcome to Remember the Human. This is a conversation between you and me about this, but I always like starting off with a nice, easy, light question. So when you think of the term artificial intelligence, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Like, what's the first thing that you think of when you think AI?
I talked about AI a lot. I think the term AI is like super overloaded. It's kind of like almost meaningless to me. Um, when you think about it, AI can be like pretty much any software that does stuff. Any algorithm is AI. Is my Tic Tac playing game AI? Maybe. But I think I usually like the term machine learning.
Okay.
Because I think that kind of differentiates it a bit more. But I don't know what comes to mind. I mean, I've been entrenched in like ML, AI, like business stuff, so like statistics and modeling and forecasting and all that, the boring shit.
So there you go. So you think of stats and the actual like science behind it, not about Terminators and RoboCop and none of that kind of stuff. You're like, yeah, okay, I know what this stuff
I,
really is. It's stats.
well, I think like we work in software, so it's not like magic to us. We kind of know a little bit about how the sausage is made.
No, that's fair. So the reason I wanted to chat with you is like one thing that we're seeing a lot more of, and we've seen this for a while with Tesla. Tesla's kind of the big driving force behind it, but there's other companies, is fully autonomous self-driving vehicles, right? Like that, or the idea of a car that can drive itself.
Yep.
And you are the one person that I know that actually has a Tesla. It's I think it's parked right in your background right now, and
That's my bad boy.
that's your bad boy right there. But it has the autopilot features, and you showed me these things, and this like that broke my mind. What is your experience owning a car that can kind of drive itself? And maybe elaborate. I know I'm butchering that, but if you want to elaborate about like what that means and how you live with that kind of car, like what is that? How's your life now with driving?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it does awesome. I find it super convenient, right? And with if you know anything about the Teslas, there's like a few different levels of it. So the one I got is like all the bells and whistles, the FSD beta. Um, but I mean, the main difference between that and the lower levels is this can drive in city situations, basically any situation. It can try and drive. Sometimes it does better than others. I love it. It's super convenient. I use it in. I don't use it all the time in the city. Maybe half the time. But when I drive out to my cabin at the lake on the weekends, like I always do it there, it's amazing. I can't imagine driving without it now when I'm doing highway driving. Like, it just takes so much, I don't know, mental focus. It's much less mentally draining to be driving because you just kind of have to pay a lot less attention. And when I'm in the city, if I want to turn and talk to my friend, or I need to fiddle with the radio, I need to eat that hamburger, I can just double click my thing and it'll drive itself. I can take my hands off and do whatever I need to do with them.
So I want to elaborate a bit about that. So like, yeah, I think about when I took driver's ed, which was like 10,000 years ago by Gen Z standards, so like forever ago. And like the big distraction on the road was like, oh, you can't eat while you're driving, you can't use your cell phone. They've been training people for most of like my driving life and our adult life to be like, you stay focused on the road. And now they're introducing this product, and you just literally described all of the things you're not supposed to be doing that we've been trained to do. And you're like, yeah, but I can go have my hamburger, talk to my buddy, and blah blah blah, and get distracted. Like, isn't that dangerous? Like, aren't you concerned about that or anything like that? Like,
Well, I mean, it's
elaborate
stuff
that.
I everybody does. In my old non-self-driving car, I would still eat hamburgers and occasionally get on my phone. I mean, just everybody does it.
Yeah, it's a good
I just
point.
feel like it's a
Good
lot
point.
lot safer to do now. And I also feel I've never like fallen asleep and crashed a car, but I feel like it's probably pretty common. And I know I definitely like got dangerously close to nodding off while driving at
Yeah,
some points in my life. And I feel like my Tesla, I think, is a lot safer. Like if I'm driving my cabin, if I were to nod off, it ain't gonna crash. I could, if it didn't have like the steering wheel sensors and all that stuff, I could fall asleep and wake up at my cabin.
that's crazy.
Now it won't
So
do that because I fell asleep. It knows I'm not touching it, and after 60 seconds or something, it'll freak out and stop.
so when it freaks out and stop, like, does it just slam the brakes on, or does it just like calmly, nicely
I,
pull over
I
and
guess it wouldn't
gently
actually
wake you
stop
up?
it. What it would do is just start beeping at you more and more aggressively, and I think eventually would disengage autopilot. I don't think the car would stop. I think it would just stop
Okay,
driving itself, which would
okay,
probably be bad. But I imagine if you fall asleep, all the beeping and crap would wake you up.
yeah. So you said like
You wouldn't be in a ditch.
it wouldn't be in a ditch. I don't need a car for that. So you said it when it works well. Um, Tell me like a situation like, and then also when it doesn't work well. Because I mean, we were in the car and there, I can think of the example of like some railway crossing where like the car did not react well to diagonal railway on Taylor. But can you elaborate like when it does work well, like some good environments where it works well? Like you said, highway. Are there anything else? Like, is it just like in the city at all? Like where does it drive really well?
Yeah, even in the city, I mean, it's pretty impressive some of the situations it can deal with. But it definitely, especially in city driving, I don't think it could go. Or it definitely couldn't without a human kind of there ready to take over. There's a lot of situations it kind of struggles with. But the thing I feel is that I feel very pretty confident in almost all situations. It's not going to smack into other cars or pedestrians or anything. The places where it doesn't do well, it's just like it becomes too cautious. Like let's say I'm trying to make a left turn onto traffic or something. It needs to wait until there's a huge honking gap in traffic on both sides of that road before it goes. It'll start creeping out to get visibility, and we're like, nope, I'm not going to go. I'm just going to
Yeah.
sit here and wait. If there's people behind you, they're going to start honking at you. Sometimes it'll start doing a maneuver and say like, oh crap, there's more cars. I'm just going to stop here, where a human would never stop in the middle of the road like that. So, which sometimes could, I guess, be potentially unsafe. But I think it's more so that it just kind of some situations it gets a little confused and just gets really slow or just stops in the middle of nowhere. Right. And as a human driver, when that happens, I just take over. You don't even need to take over. If it's like making a turn or it's being too cautious, you can actually just tap the gas and
Okay.
it'll just go. You don't even need to like fully take over. You just get the gas a tap and just goes.
So yeah, just explain that a little bit more about what it means to take over. So you just like you say, tap the gas, and it just goes forward. Like, like how
What
seamless is it from going from, I guess it's called autopilot, like from autopilot to you driving? Like, what's the, is there a bridge or a button or a, I don't know, a hand signal? I don't know.
you just grab the wheel and
Okay.
you put a little if you're putting a little resistance, because you're supposed to be holding the wheel while it's driving. You can put a little resistance and it'll still steer through the resistance. But if you put a lot of resistance or like significant amount, you grab that wheel and turn it, it'll go beep boop and no more autopilot.
Okay. That's really interesting. So I remember the story that when you took me for a ride in this thing, you were driving through like my neighborhood, which is a very highly dense residential area, always under construction because it's an old part of the city, and it like weaved through construction. There's a bunch of cyclists that were coming down the road too, and I could see like the display you have in front of you, and you could just see it just mirrored all that stuff on your display. Calmly pulled in behind like a big pile of sand for this construction site, and then went around it and just kind of seamlessly wove through traffic with no issue. Like I still like I say like that blew my mind because that got me thinking. I have this goal. I want to kind of lead into the next kind of bit of this about where autopilot sort of self-driving cars are kind of going. So I have a daughter and she's 8 years old in a week, and that means she's 8 years away from having to learn how to drive. And the number one thing that I've always said, like since she was born, is like, I never want to teach this girl how to drive. I want to teach no one how to drive. I never want this for my life. That's not me. I don't want this. So my goal in terms of success for this product is, can I buy a vehicle in 8 years that will basically make sure my kid doesn't have to learn how to drive? The car will take care of most of it for her and me, ideally. And so I don't think that your Tesla can do that right now. I don't think you can just send it off to go pick up your kids or my kids or whatever. But like 8 years is a long time in technology years, especially the way things are going. Curious to know, like looking at what you have now, what kind of future do you see for Tesla, or not just as Tesla, but self-driving vehicles for people, like just regular people like you and me?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think once you get there to like the fully self-driving and like they're testing out in some places in the US, where you don't need a human driver overseeing it, I think car ownership is just going to change dramatically. They talk about like mobility as a service a lot. Like people won't need to own cars when you can just press a button on your phone and a driverless car comes and picks you up and takes you where you're going. It'll really be mobility as a service. I need to get from point A to point B, and I don't need to own a car to do that anymore. And I think you'll see a lot less cars on the road if we ever get to that world. Because if you think about it now, your car, my car, how many hours of the 24 hours in a day are they parked and not being used? Right? I know
That's a good
Elon Musk
point.
talks about this a lot, that you think about the utility of a car, what percentage of the time I'm actually using that car to get me from point A to point B. Um, on average is pretty low, definitely less than 50%, probably like 10% of the time in the day you're actually driving your car. But if there's fully autonomous cars driving people around, like ride sharing, hailing a taxi type service, you can get a lot more utility out of a car. You'll need a lot less of them. It'll probably be a lot cheaper than owning a car.
It's really interesting. So, and right now, like if I'm reading this, the Society of Automotive Engineering, I think that's what they're called, SOAE, something like that. Anyway, they have the 6 levels of self-driving cars, and yours is a level 1 or 2.
Too. So I'll tell you the levels as they were explained to me
Sure,
because I've
perfect.
I've seen what you get when you Google them, and it's kind of dry reading.
Yeah,
I know that this because a few years ago, I'm sure you know this. I was working with one of the big auto companies, helping them on their self-driving car software. Um, I kind of got exposed to all this stuff. It was super interesting. But yeah, so the 6 levels, levels 0 through 6. Level 0 is basically, cars from 40 years ago that had nothing. Level 1 is basically every car on the road today, which basically means some basic driver assistance technology. If it has cruise control, it counts as level 1. If it has
okay,
anti-lock brakes, it counts as level 1. Um, Level 2 is only somewhat more recently, like with my Tesla and a few other ones or actually most luxury cars nowadays probably be counted as level 2. Level 2 is sometimes called hands off. Level 2 is the hands off level. And,
okay,
level 3 is eyes off. Level 4 is minds off. I'll talk about this in a second. But level 2, hands off. It basically means that in some scenarios, like highway driving, the car can perform all driving functions. It can operate the gas, the brake, and the steering. Basically, any car nowadays with adaptive cruise control and lane keep assist, I would consider a level 2. Like it can do all functions of driving at some points in time. Um, that's kind of level 2, but the driver still needs to be looking at the road at all times and be
right.
able to take over at a moment's notice. Car does something unsafe, you're expected to immediately take over. So you can be hands off, but not eyes off. And then level 3, I've heard called the eyes off level, where you're still going to be in the driver's seat, but you don't need to be looking at the road all the time. You can be reading that newspaper, watching that movie on your cell phone. But if the car proactively like beeps at you or something and says, "Hey, we're coming off of something I don't know how to handle. I need you to take over." Within 10, 20, 30 seconds, you need to be able to put down that newspaper and take over. Um, and then level 4, I've heard is minds off, which is the same thing, but you can take a nap. Maybe you're not even sitting in the driver's seat, you're sitting in the passenger seat. So it can kind of go for longer stretches with less driver input. And when it does need your input, like maybe a blizzard starts and it can't drive in a blizzard, it will like, pull over to the side of the road if you're not ready to take over and stop.
Okay,
But so that's what did I say? That's level 4.
that's level 4. Yeah.
Yeah, but basically, it can fully self-driving except in some circumstances. And then level 5 is basically the same thing, but in all circumstances. So level 5 means cars without steering wheels. Like the human will never need to take over.
So yeah, like I say, a lot of luxury cars. I was doing some research about this. A handful of cars, from what I hear, like or companies rather, have level 3 cars available. And I want to put air quotes around it because I kind of read into it. I haven't heard about everyone buying their brand new level 3 Mercedes. Like I figured that would be a bigger news item if suddenly there was a bunch of conditional automation or uh hands off or sorry, eyes off level cars driving around suddenly. Um, are we going to start seeing more of these sorts of things like in the near future? Like in terms of what you've seen. I know you're not in that industry, but like rather from like, you're connected to that world. So like,
Yeah,
are
I
you going to
read
see
a
like an
lot about
upgrade
it.
for that? Yeah. So
Well,
like, is Tesla going to
I,
have a
I
level 3 upgrade for you at some point, or?
Well, I mean, I think that's the dream. That's what Elon certainly hopes. Um, I don't think any company is. I don't think me or you can buy level 3 cars yet. It's just not
Okay.
available. But there is like Google Waymo and some of those other ones down in Phoenix and San Francisco have like the
Yeah.
driverless taxi services that they're trialing, and those would be, I don't know, probably level 4 cars, I guess. Like there's certainly nobody in there to take over. Um, but level 3 would be next for like Teslas or Mercedes or whatever. But I think going from level 2 where we are now to level 3 is going to be a really hard jump, probably the hardest. Because the problem is once I'm eyes off the road reading a newspaper, um, for Tesla at least, it doesn't really need anything more than it has now. They need to have more confidence in the system that they have. Because once I'm reading the newspaper and I don't have to be looking at the road, if my car crashes into somebody and it's my car's fault, um, is it my fault? Do I have to pay that insurance bill? Is insurance even going to be a thing? Do I need to get insured, or does Tesla, the author of the software that caused the crash, need to be insured? Because I'm not at fault. I was reading the newspaper, and it never told me to take over, right?
Right.
So it becomes a weird, big liability question. So I think even if Tesla or Mercedes or these other companies were ready with all the tech they need for level 3 right now, I
Yeah.
think a lot of like the legal compliance insurance things is going to make it a really hard jump. Because as soon as they tell drivers you don't need to be paying attention
Yeah.
at every second, it gets weird, like liability wise.
And then it comes into that idea like the mobility as a service, right? Like that makes way more sense as a service where I like no longer own cars. I just have an app, and when I need a vehicle, I push a button and then something shows up to pick me up or whatever I need, right? Based on what I put in the app or what my subscription is. But then that's the company's insurance. It's a really good point. Even ties into that idea. So like so let's say there's this option that you have a Tesla let's say you get that level 3 option. They go and Elon comes up to you and says, "Hey, Dylan, here I got a proposition for you, man. You can let your Tesla be a DoorDash driver or a skip the dishes driver all night, and you're going to get 80% of that cut. You just got to let the car drive itself around." Like, would you take an option like that? Like, start investing in that idea of letting my car leverage that utility? Because I mean, let's ignore the insurance bit. I'll get into that in a second. But the safety aspect, like, let's just assume that kind of works. What's your like? Is that an investment opportunity for you? Do you think? Like, where would you go with that?
I think it's probably for a lot of people. If your car can go out there and make you money, it changes the whole equation of car ownership.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's gonna. I don't think that's gonna happen. I don't think people are gonna be sending their cars out to drive other people around. I think, um, if and when cars get to the point where that is like a very feasible option, there will just be big companies that operate big fleets of them,
Yeah.
right? That can handle those logistics better than me sending my car out from my garage overnight. What if somebody vandalizes it, or a drunk person pukes in it, or
Right.
steals it, or whatever? I think fleet operators, I just can deal with that a lot better.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I mean,
I think
even
the
you think.
consumer experience will be the same, whether it's Dylan's Tesla while he's at work versus the taxi company's
Right.
driverless car picking you up. I think the consumer experience will be the same.
Yeah. No, that tracks. So, like right now, you have no insurance or liability considerations. Like, I want to touch into that. Like, from what
If
you've
if
read,
my
like
car gets in an accident while it's in like self-driving mode, it is my fault. It's not the
it's your
company.
fault. But like,
If it
I know
crashes,
that
it's because
there's.
I didn't take over.
But are there states like where like what have you read about that from like okay, again consumer based? I'm not trying to get an expert opinion here. I'll go find a lawyer for that. But I'm curious like from do you expect to see that kind of thing change in the next 5 years? Like what like on your from
I
like
do.
where you want to be and what you've seen?
Yeah, well, I think, like I said, the whole level 3 where you don't have to be paying attention at all times. I think it'll happen in the next 5 years. Um,
Okay.
I think that'll change that. Um, I think the Tesla, when I've seen the self driving, needs to get probably quite a bit better in city driving before I think I would do that if I was a decision maker. But I think within 5 years it'll certainly be there. It gets better every month. Every month my car downloads some update, and I notice things that it didn't handle well. It's handling better. Now, certain streets I drive down, a lot of corners I drive down a lot. I'm like, hey, it always got confused at this corner. It doesn't get confused anymore. That's nice.
Okay. So you're actually
Uh,
seeing that improvement as you
yeah,
is
so
that
they're
your car
iterating.
specifically or is it's just the software itself is iterating getting updates?
Yeah, Like new releases of the software come down
Okay.
pretty much every month.
Okay, so
I
it's
mean,
not
I
like it's
assume
training a
I assume
special Dylan model just for you.
no, I mean, it is my car is getting better, but I assume every other Tesla owner is getting
Hope
the same updates I am.
let's hope so.
I haven't gone out there and done any checking.
No, fair enough. Everyone talks about the side of self-driving cars as like the awe and wonder, right? They think of like the sci-fi aspect of like the self-driving car. But like let's talk about like the changing logistics of like car ownership. I think that's how you worded it. So a lot of folks drive a car for a living, right? I mentioned skip the dishes. You got that whole commodity base, but you also have taxi drivers. You got truck drivers. Like transportation as an industry is a business, right? There's people's jobs in there. Um, how do you see that transforming? Like, I'm just like what do you see for that? Do you see people still having driving jobs, or do you see those jobs just
Yeah,
changing or disappearing?
if I was a truck driver or a taxi driver, um, at least a younger one with a full career ahead of me, I'd be pretty worried right now. Because I don't know how quickly it's going to happen, but let's say 10 years from now, I don't think those jobs will exist anymore, or
So,
dramatically less of them than there are now.
so you're saying like in 10 years, which kind of like goes because the reason we have
I think
professional
it'll probably be
drivers.
sooner, but let's say 10 years, I think for
Okay.
sure.
So the reason we have professional drivers, though, in that sense, they're literally professionals, right? They have a special license. They are, I've had interesting taxi drivers and folks drive me. I don't know if they're safer than I would be driving, but apparently they are. Let's talk about the safety aspects of that because that's the thing that people talk about, right? Everyone talks about the horror stories of like, oh man, I saw that Tesla video and that guy drove right into a picture of a road, or just whatever. And there's always these anecdotal horror stories, and like that's why the cars can never take over. Humans are going to exist we're going to drive forever. Like, what's your take on how do you feel safe? You said you feel safer in your Tesla, but like elaborate on that. Like, where do you think that's going to go? Like, is it safer?
I mean, I think that's tough to say. I mean, I know Tesla and these other companies come out with these stats, how many accidents per million miles or deaths per million miles. And I think they're showing it is now, but I mean, it's certainly only going to get better in the future. So even if it's not objectively safer now, I think it's only a matter of time. But I think what kind of bugs me is that there's a big psychological problem with it. And you see these articles in the news. This guy had a Tesla self-driving in the highway and he smashed into a semi-trailer or smashed into a concrete divider and killed the guy or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and people freak out like, "Oh my God, self-driving cars! They're not ready. They're killing people. How are we allowing these things on the road?" But I think what people that have that reaction aren't thinking about is human drivers get in stupid car accidents every day, and thousands of people die every day. I'm sure it's the leading cause of death in you know Canada is car accidents. People get in stupid car accidents and kill themselves and kill other people all the time. Um, and I think as more self-driving cars, more and more people are using them, and they get more and more like level 3 or whatever. Self-driving cars will get in accidents, and people will die, no matter how safe they are, no matter how good they are. They are going to kill people. I think the question is, are they going to kill less people than human drivers would have? I think the tricky bit is how do you measure that? But I'm sure some smart people will figure out some kind of objective measures. Um, I think that's what a lot of people are missing is it's not do they get in accidents and kill people? Of course they will. It's are they getting in less accidents? As soon as they pass the point where they kill less people than human drivers, if we are not using them at that point, then we're basically sacrificing lives by sticking with human drivers and not allowing them to come in here and save lives. I
So
think
no,
I think it's also tricky too because I was thinking about this a bit today. Um, I think the typical accidents that you'll read about where self-driving Teslas get in and kill somebody, um, I think the circumstances of those accidents are probably different than the typical circumstances that human drivers get in and then they get killed.
right.
You know, and people, look at these and say, "Oh, I would never do that as a human driver, drive into a semi truck in broad daylight in the middle of the highway." But human drivers aren't really all that safe. It's not
No.
because an average human driving and paying attention to the road, pretty safe. The problem is when you're not paying attention to the road, when you're fiddling with the radio, when you're eating that hamburger, when you spilled mustard on your shirt, now you're trying to clean it off, when you're yelling, the kids are yelling and fighting in the back seat, and you're trying to pull one off the other one, right? when you're had too many beers and you're drunk, when you're falling asleep on that long drive to the cabin, like those are the times when humans get in accidents.
Yeah.
Um, and self-driving cars, like those causes that I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing, that would just never happens, right? It's a machine. It's always paying attention. That's all it does. Um, but the accidents that full self-driving cars get into are not because they're not paying attention. It's because they're making some poor decision. They tried to um, turn left and they didn't see that car come in, so they smacked into it. Or this semi trailer that had a weird color and it didn't recognize. I don't know why it crashed the semi trailer, but for
Yeah.
whatever reason, and those are situations that a human that's paying attention probably wouldn't get into. Certainly, there's times like if I'm turning left on a busy road and I got to wait for oncoming traffic. As a human, I'm probably almost or very rarely going to get in a serious accident doing that because that is the one time I am paying attention. If my
Right.
kids are fighting, I'm not pulling them off while making a left turn into traffic,
Yeah.
right? Or rubbing
Hopefully.
my mustard off while trying to blindly make the left turn. When I'm making a left turn in traffic, that's the time I stop what I'm doing. I look up and I pay attention.
Right.
But those are the times when the self-driving car is probably most likely to get in an accident, and maybe the least likely for distracted humans.
So it's really I like that. That's a really good way of thinking about it because like you said, when a human is focused, they're in those critical moments. And there's another. I'll take this in a separate direction in a sec to kind of counterpoint it a little bit. So you said like when a human is focused, they're focused on those critical situations. It's more the complacent things, like you said, drives on the highway. Like I know, like my kids are arguing, or they want to sing overly loud, or whatever they're going to do. Just distractions. Like life is a distraction generally. And a car's not, and a machine's not going to do that. There's also the idea of like, I'm going to pull this is straight out of media, but like making a hard decision, right? So I haven't heard any stories about this. Like, so there's a point of like, you see that you're going to get into a car accident. Like there's those moments, you hit the brakes, you're on a sheet of ice and you just, okay, I got an option of hitting the car in front of me, going into the ditch or up onto the sidewalk where there might be a person. How do we delegate that kind of thing? Because a human kind of just reacts. Like a lot of it is just us just doing, and we can argue that we're like, I just reacted. Like the meat kind of did its thing, and I reacted, and whatever happened happened. When it comes to a car, it's a machine, it's an algorithm. We can figure that out. What kind of do you think that's going to be safer or more dangerous? Like, well, where do you take on those kind of ethical concerns
I think
around that?
it's a total red herring, and it doesn't
Okay.
matter. I don't care how often do those come up, and do you really think a human's going to make more ethical decisions than a computer in those one in a million situations where do I drive off a cliff or do I smack into the school bus? Right? I just think it's so doesn't matter, in my
No,
opinion.
no, that's a great answer. Um, so a couple other things. I want to talk about this, continuing with the safety bit. I was this is a while back. I've been looking at some of the like, what are some things that you could see that are innovative for driving? Because you think about like a car, like innovation beyond self-driving, right? Like just the regular car and driving. Like it's been pretty normal for the last 100 years. Like we've gotten better cars, but at the end of the day, it's got four wheels, it goes a direction, and it does its thing, and we steer it. Um, and then we added seatbelts. We had all these extra features to make them better. What kind of potential could you see being unlocked again beyond the replacing the human driver? But what other potential do you see for self-driving autonomous vehicles in terms of the safety side of it? Like that humans just could not even fathom having this option. Something that only machines could do.
I'm not sure what you're getting at with the safety side. I mean, I think more of the convenience side. Like
Okay.
I imagine, I used to travel a lot for work, planes everywhere, and I think if so, in 10 years from now, whenever self-driving cars are a full thing, I can just call it up and have it drive me anywhere. I think for like medium distance trips, I might be more likely to take a car than a plane now. Um, right? If I can, like from Winnipeg to drive to Minneapolis is like what 7 hours. To drive to Calgary is like 10, 11
Yeah,
hour
10 or
drive.
12. Yeah.
Let's just say it's 10 hours to Calgary for argument's sake. Um, well, for me, if I take a plane to Calgary, okay, well, I gotta get a taxi to the airport. I gotta leave my house. It's call the taxi, wait for them. It's a half hour to the airport. I got to get to the airport 2 hours before my flight. I take the flight. It's a 2 hour flight to get there. I got to wait for my baggage. I got to go stand in line for the taxi. I got the taxi to my airport. Even if I'm flying there, it's probably five hours or something. At least probably 6 hours.
Yeah.
Um, from door to door, my house in Winnipeg to my hotel in Calgary. Maybe it's 6 hours versus 10 hours in a car. But if it was a self-driving car where I could pull the seat down to a bed and go to sleep, or pull at the desk and do some work, or watch some movies, or read my book the whole time, whenever I want to stop, I can tell the car to stop and go to a nice restaurant versus hauling my suitcase and dealing with the airport and the
Yeah.
cramped plane and the check-in and going and making connections or whatever. I think there's a lot of scenarios where I might prefer it might be more convenient and comfortable to drive, and I don't have to leave my house at a certain time. I can wake up and call that car whenever I'm ready, and if it's sitting in my driveway for 30 minutes while I'm packing my crap because I'm not ready, whatever. I think that could be a lot nicer. Now, if I'm going from Winnipeg down to Mexico, right, I'm still flying no matter what.
Yeah.
I
No,
think
that's
there's a
fair.
lot of like medium distance places where I might have flown before, where if the in-car experience changes because I don't need to be sitting at that driving wheel and paying attention on
Right.
the road the whole time, I think that could be a very valid option. I think a lot of flight travel might shift to car travel.
That's a good point. Especially like I know that a lot of people right now are complaining about the cost of domestic travel in Canada. Like it's just insanely expensive to travel domestically compared to what it was 10 years ago, like in other countries even. So where I was going with the safety thing though. So the idea is that I saw a demo, this was years ago, about this kind of idea of cars that could talk to one another. And they could do, you think of it like the drones. You see these drone displays where they're doing like designs in the sky and they're making animations happen. But think of it in just the driving sense that what they did was they had these four cars go high speed towards each other towards a 4 point intersection. So they're all going to just do a beautiful, delightful crash right in the middle. That's the whole point. What ends up happening is they realize none of them can stop in time and they all speak the same, whatever, car language, and they all kind
Mhm.
of shift. And so they all just kind of swerve out of the way of each other. And they got two of them got insanely close. Like it was pretty close. It like could have been an error, could have been a mistake, but they at least got all out of the way in such a way that they could, but they were only able to do that because they could communicate rather than just what they're doing now. That's kind of one of the things I'm seeing for future potential. Because I think I'm a very safe driver, but I don't trust anyone else on the road. I would much rather trust my self-driving car and your self-driving car to talk rather than you and me. You know what I mean? Like that was just my demo on the
I
safety side of it.
Well, I think if we ever get to a place, I'm not sure this will. I don't think this will probably happen in our lifetimes, but where every car on the road is self-driving, and I
Hmm.
think cars crashing into other cars will basically be non-existent. Um, it doesn't mean accidents won't still happen, right? Pedestrians do stupid stuff, or
Yep.
construction truck backing up where it's not supposed to, whatever, right? But I think as you get a majority or a vast majority of cars on the road that are all driven by computers, if those computers can talk to each other, do we even need traffic lights anymore? They can just negotiate that on their own. It's all kinds of things that open up. But I think before you get some of those scenarios, it's not just having self-driving cars. I think it's getting rid of human-driven cars on the road to mess it up,
That's
which
fair.
I think is a long, long way off.
And so like why is it such a long way off though? It's not the tech clearly, or is it the tech?
Well, even if we had fully level 5 cars without steering wheels tomorrow, how long do you think it takes to phase out all the existing human-driven cars?
Yeah,
What
good
about
point.
that guy that loves his muscle car that you're gonna have to pry it out of his cold, dead hands, right? Like, even if all the tech for level 5 was there tomorrow, I still think it would be 20 plus years before you could get to any world like that.
That's a really good point. The idea of the just freedom of choice and just the amount of time it takes to change, right? Every change is hard. The tech is the easy part, but the change is hard.
And can you imagine telling some of those, Texans of the Southern Americans that you're not allowed to drive anymore? God, Jesus, I can't even imagine it.
Go to those like what does that mean for things like car racing? But you go to those like there's like the parking lot at the restaurant. What is it? The Pony Corral, like the night where everyone drives their cars up. Go to them. Hey guys, thanks for driving your car here tonight. You can't drive at home. You're not allowed to anymore. It's illegal. Like
Yeah. I
that's
mean,
a
some of
that's a
it's a
passion.
fun or just a rights factor or whatever. I think that world will eventually happen. I'm just not sure it'll happen in our lifetimes.
Oh, that's fair. So this has been a really great chat. We're kind of getting to I think we're getting to a good point to close. But I want to ask you a couple of questions about where do you see this going? And if you're like when you look at the next 10, 20 years, like our lifetime, what about autonomous driving excites you? Like, what's the thing beyond like the convenience aspect and like what do you see like in the long-term future, but like what's the beautiful thing that you're like, this is the dream? Like why are you so passionate and so interested in doing this at such an early stage in this, I don't know, life cycle of this whole new tech?
I like that for me, it's just all the convenience, right? I'm really looking forward to being able to, you spend a lot of time in your car. Well, maybe me not so much, but most people spend a bunch of time in their cars. And being able to get that time back and use it for something being more productive than staring at the wheel, the road, and holding the wheel. Right? When I think we get to service right now, I could probably live without a car and just Ubers, and just Uber everywhere. I think Uber is really convenient, and when I travel, I basically just get around with Ubers. Pretty convenient, but that would be fairly costly for most people. But I think if you can have the convenience of Uber at like a third of the price, if you don't got to pay for the driver because it's all autonomous, I think that becomes a real thing. And once I can have a car pick me up and take me, I can do stuff while I'm driving. I can be reading, I can be working, I can be watching a movie and getting all that time back. I think that's the part of the future that excites me the most.
Very cool. Well, Dylan, thanks for being on the show. Do you have anything you
Thank
want to
you.
shout out or anything like that you want to share with the audience? You good?
I'm good.
You're good. Well, thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it. This has been really insightful. It gives me a lot of good ideas to think about in the future. And like I say, it sounds like my dream of not having to teach my kid how to drive. Like it's getting close. One day.
You got 8 years, you said. I think you might be okay.
Okay, 8 years. I will pay a lot of money for that feature in any car. Just like that's the dream for me. Just
And I think
outsource that
even
problem to a computer.
even if they do have to learn how to drive in 8 years, I think driving a modern car 8 years from now will be very different than driving, a car today or a couple years ago.
That's fair. If we have a level 3 car and how do you learn how to drive when the car kind of drives itself? Like you have to know the basics at that point, but
Yeah.
fascinating. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Dillian. And we'll stay in touch. Talk to you soon. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you.
Subscribe, follow, and learn more at www.rememberthehuman.ai.